Hi, we'd like to welcome you to another in a series of webinars designed for departments of transportation. I'm Terry Bills, the Transportation Industry Manager here at Esri, and today I'm joined by Gary Waters, who's the Director of our Transportation Sales Team, along with Tom Brenneman and Jose Larios, both Solution Engineers on our Transportation team. Today's webinar is focused on the highly dynamic and challenging environment for transportation planners. Happy to say we have several really great demos that are designed to both standardize the planning processes as well as to deliver greater insights and ability to drive data-driven decision-making for planning professionals. Before we begin, I'd like to point out that we're recording this webinar, and while everyone will be on mute, there will be time for question and answers at the end of the presentation. You can type your questions into the question box and we'll try to answer as many as time allows. And additionally, the slides which are part of this webinar will be available to you on the GeoNet group, Departments of Transportation, and we'll give you the link at the end of the webinar. So to start with, I'm sure everyone on this webinar is aware of the rapidly changing dynamics in transportation and the great uncertainties as we try to look ahead and how we can plan for the future of our transportation systems. A few of the key elements that stand out. First, across the board, I think transportation agencies are being asked to do more with less. We operate in a world of constrained resources, and we never have adequate resources to deliver the transportation systems that the public wants and expects. And at the same time, expectations from the public are increasing. They all want good roads, they want quick and efficient public transportation systems, rapid goods movement, but at the same time, there's a strong reluctance to pay for it. At the same time, there are rapid and fundamental changes to our mobility patterns. The rise of TNCs and other new mobility options, together with the decline in auto ownership among millennials, and together with the changes in our urban patterns, with the rediscovery of our urban centers, has led to rapidly changing mobility patterns, which are often difficult to measure and to quantify. And finally, there are significant technology advancements that will have a huge impact on our future transportation networks. But how to plan for these changes is, I think, still unclear. And this includes both connected vehicles and autonomous navigation, two issues that will take an ever-increasing amount of attention from planners. So taken together, I think it's safe to say that we live in challenging times for transportation planners. And now let's turn to the changes in the regulatory environment and all of the requirements that undergird the state and regional planning processes. And here I think 5 major factors stand out. The latest Transportation Authorization Acts mandate that the transportation planning process must be driven by decision-making processes that rely on good information systems and defensible analysis. Obviously, for most of us, that should not be a difficult mandate. That said, it does force transportation agencies to put an ever greater emphasis on their information systems, as these really become one of our greatest assets in our planning process. And next is both MAP 21 and the FAST Act specifically require a performance-based approach to transportation decision-making that supports national performance goals related to safety, mobility, goods movement, preservation, and environmental sustainability. And next, every DOT, every transportation agency has to demonstrate that they have implemented a transportation asset management plan, a TAMP. And these plans must focus on preserving core transportation assets and include a life cycle cost and risk management analysis. And then next, the transportation planning agencies need to consider requirements across all program areas, not just pavements and bridges, but also freight, active transportation, and transit, and that address all of our critical deficiencies. And in short, our mobility challenges really require smarter planning and a more comprehensive planning approach. And finally, this final requirement really comes less from statute and more from the growing public expectation of greater transparency in the way that public dollars are expended. And so smart DOTs are taking proactive measures to ensure greater transparency and better public engagement. And finally, we want to talk about all the requirements for an effective planning process. And at the top of that list is access to the right information. And in talking to any number of planning directors, there's a common refrain that they feel that they do not have access to all of the information they need to make good planning decisions. This factor is often compounded by the fact that information sources are spread across the various departments, offices, and divisions within our transportation planning agencies. Yet planners need access to detailed asset condition data, to safety data, and data on modal deficiencies, among other data sets. And often this data is not easily accessible to planners and is often brought together with great difficulty in our organizations. And the needs and the deficiencies of the various transportation modal networks have to be understood. And this really requires systematic data collection and organization alongside a seamless integration with both sophisticated models and analytical tools. These really can't be isolated and ad hoc processes, but should be primary components of the overall planning workflow. Next, transportation planners need to be able to conduct multi-criteria decision analyses among projects, really to make the most strategic decisions across asset classes. And this ensures that the efficient expenditure of resources and ultimately a favorable return on our investments in transportation. Next, senior managers need a way to effectively monitor the performance against their established metrics. Doing so supports a process of continuous improvement as part of a DOT's planning and programming processes to help monitor progress towards agency goals. And finally, effective performance-based planning ultimately requires considerable coordination, not only within, but across agencies, between DOTs and MPOs and regional transportation planning organizations and transit agencies. This ensures that all parties can coordinate and collaborate on the development of shared goals, objectives, performance measures, and the targets. And taken together, this sets the stage for how GIS and location intelligence can assist planners in meeting these challenges. With that high-level introduction, let me turn it over to Gary to take a deeper dive into how ArcGIS can help planners meet these requirements. Gary, over to you.
All right, thank you, Terry. Well, if it wasn't obvious from Terry describing the process, it can be a fairly complex one when you look at the end-to-end process of initiating a potential project or need and having it go all the way through its inclusion in the STIP. This diagram maps out one state DOT's process to get from beginning to end. And as you can see, I might have set the record for the number of arrows on one slide, but it is a complex and very diverse set of organizations that contribute to that. What we've tried to do is take that complex drawing and boil down the capabilities into discrete application areas and create technology, use some of our configurable apps, work with our partners and customers to build out a series of configurable apps that all work together to accomplish this entire process. So some of the partners I would like to mention, just because they've contributed some of the slides that I have here and have done some pretty significant work: Aesthetic, Decision Lens, PMG, JMT, Citygate, Timmins, Worldview, GeoDecisions are just some of the partners that we've worked with to provide these solutions. So I wanted to quickly give you a little bit of a concept of what each of these application areas are. One of the things we wanted to do was make the tools easy to get to and have a consistent place to go find them. using our portal, we're able to create an environment where you can get to all of the needed functionality to work through this process. So the portfolio concept is really an app that's set up to visualize and share location and information about your project. So this can be used internally, published out to the public, used by the legislators. There's lots of capabilities that you can use to get your project information out there. Nomination is an analytical app that allows you to go through data of your assets and start to figure out what needs to be worked on. So helping create the needs. What is the pavement condition here? Do I need to resurface this, rebuild this, mill and fill? All those kinds of analytics that are often done by asset management systems, but we also have tools for maybe in the safety arena where you might want to do some crash analysis and find out if there's safety factors that could lead to a project need. Another application is proposing, and this is an app that allows business units, district offices, MPOs, the public. Basically, you could open this up to anyone to allow them to put in proposed projects for inclusion in your investment portfolio. I did want to give a quick shout out to our colleagues at Massachusetts DOT. They won an internal award last year for their MAP-IT application, and they just were awarded an award from the American Public Works Association for that same application and its contribution to the planning and selection process. So congratulations to them for that. Bundling, this is taking project needs that may cross different asset types and allowing you to pull them together into a project. So you might have safety reasons, drainage reasons, pavement reasons all together, and by analyzing spatially where all of that is, you can bundle them together and make one project and help with the efficiency and effectiveness of your project selection. Optimizing is taking the business rules and the logic that you want to apply. Like we are more concerned with safety versus the environmental or the congestion or whatever is most important in your organization, and start to optimize the selection of our projects across all of the asset types, and built some really sophisticated tools. This is an area where our partner Decision Lens has done some significant work in helping with that kind of effort. Measuring, so performance measurement, Terry mentioned a lot of new regulations and is being applied from FHWA to look at the performance of the assets and the performance of your investments and the impact they're having on those assets. So we built some tools to allow you to measure what is going on with your assets and investments. Calculating price or formulating a pre-engineering cost is something we've been able to build into the system. As you look at project selection and try to provide feedback to the constituents and the people that are inputting the potential project needs, these tools give you a way to figure out what the potential cost is. Also ranking, so developing a score for each project, and again, you can come up with any kind of formula that rewards certain types of projects. So again, looking at your priorities, if safety is the #1 issue, then you can rank and score your projects based on their contribution to safety versus condition or congestion or some of the other areas that I mentioned. And then funding. Obviously, at the end of the day, all of these projects have to be funded. So figuring out what your funding sources are, what amount of funding you have, and applying that annual funding specific to the projects in coordination. Again, a partner, PMG, has built some really nice tools to manage that entire process, including notification to FHWA. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and let him demo some of the tools that I just described.
Thanks, Gary. Can you see my screen all right?
We can.
Okay, great. All right, so I want to show you the Massachusetts application, which is a project submission application. And the challenge in Massachusetts was a lot of the projects or potential projects around the state were being were submitted through a traditional paper-based system. They were looking to improve that process and make it easier for projects to be submitted and use some of the data that they had within the organization to apply to each one of those potential projects as it was coming into the system. So add some real intelligence to the project during the submission process. And that's where the Map It application came in. So that's the application that you're seeing here. It's a web-based application where a project submitter, whether that's someone from the district or municipalities, based on their login. So you can see here, my name's Tom Brenneman. I'm logged in up here in the upper right. It's showing me who I am. So that's good. That's me. I can go into the system and I could do something like search for an intersection where I know I want to do some work here on State Road 38. So I just searched for an intersection, zoomed into that intersection, and I see the section of road that I'm interested in. I also see some linear referencing information for that section of road, just to give me an indicator of where I am on that particular roadway. Then from there, I'll just point out some other tools that you have available for investigating the data. Of course, you could print this, identify some of the data, but you could also change the base map. So I can see here some different imagery for that particular area that could just help in the decision making. But also, I can visualize a lot of the data that's available in the organization. And you can see there's lots of different data sets that are available here, but I'll just turn on one, the FEMA flood zones. And just like that, if I'm a submitter, I might not have a lot of GIS skills or really understanding what GIS is at all, but I can turn on a layer like this, the FEMA flood zones, and I can use that to inform my decisions. And as you can see, there's lots of other data sets that are available in here. So right off the bat, just by exposing an environment where all of those layers could be visualized within the project submission, really makes a big difference for everyone involved. But when they start the process and I say, okay, well, I'm ready to submit a new resurfacing project that I think we need to do on this section of road, we just click this initiate workflow button, and there's a variety of different workflows that I can choose from. I'll just point out a couple here. One is basic screening, and that's if I just want to sketch an area on the roadway and get some information about all the data that's available at that location. And then whether I'm a municipality or I'm submitting a highway project, a municipal project or a highway project, I have a variety of different choices here, whether I'm putting in an existing facility or a new facility, and whether it's in one of this program, Safe Routes to School. I'm going to choose an existing facility, and I'm going to give my project a name so that I'll recognize it and a title. I'll put the name of the municipality that it's in, Tewksbury. Mispronounced that for a long time. Difficult there in Massachusetts, but anyway, I'll choose just some information that I need to submit as part of every form. So the information that I'm filling in here is what used to be on their paper-based form for submitting these. So we took a lot of those inputs and we made them available via this digital entry. And I'll put in my email one more time. There we go. Those are the main components just to get started with submitting this project. And don't worry, I won't fill out all the form entries on the following screens, but I just wanted to show you that this really walks you through the process of filling in the required components, whether it's textual or, as you can see here, identifying where on the roadway we're going to make this change. So I can go in and just sketch an area and say, I want to change something about this section of the roadway. And when I do that, it highlights the roads in that area and asks me, okay, which one of those roads are you interested in changing? Because that polygon that you just drew on the ground, that area you just drew, intersects several different roads. So I'm going to uncheck these ones. I only want to do work on State Road 38 northbound and southbound. I'll uncheck these other ones. and click submit. And now that's stored with this particular project, all of that location information. And this is really a big deal because now everything about the location, there's no ambiguity with regard to what the location is for this project. And that makes a big difference as we progress through this process, because what we can do is use that location to understand and leverage the rest of the GIS data that's available in the state for this particular area. And just to give you some context of what would happen in the old paper-based system at this point, when they were using paper, once you got to this part of the submission, you had to answer a lot of questions that could be answered through data that existed in the organization. And to do that, the individual would make data requests out to the different parts of the organization to get some understanding of what the situation was for this particular location. And that usually involved interacting with a lot of different departments around the DOT. Well, now when they get to this part of the process, they will run this geoprocessing, which will evaluate all that data based on the location that they've already defined. So since we have all that GIS data, and we have this new location for this project that they want to put in, we can intersect the two to understand where, what the answers to the questions they have for these different data sets. And each one of these lines that's popping up here is another data request that you could imagine someone would have to do. And you can see things that are highlighted here represent areas of concern, like HSIP crash clusters. That's something that that has been identified in this particular area. Maybe that would influence the funding that's available, the safety funding that might be available for a project like this in this area. So in 1 minute and 22 seconds, we were able to answer all the questions for all the different data sets that were needed for this particular project. And all that information has been saved with this project submittal. So when we move on to the rest of the form, you'll see that parts of the form are already filled in for me. So it knows where the municipality is, what district this is in, what MPO region. It asked me what the primary road is here. I'm going to say this is the northbound is the primary road. It just gives me options along with the LRS information for all the roads that are involved here. It knows what the, whether it's urban or rural, it knows all this information. So it fills in what it can in the rest of the form. And this is what really made this a success in Massachusetts, because the people submitting now saw that it was easier to submit these forms via this interface. They didn't have to make all those data requests. The system took care of it for them, and it helped fill out the form. If I scroll down here, you can see that it fills in some of the pavement information, and even further down, some of the transit information and some of the safety information down here. So it really filled in a lot of information. And if I were to go through and fill out the rest of this form, I could then submit this for review to the DOT. And I would do that by just clicking this Submit for Acceptance button. And when I do that, it's prompting me to let me know that I need to fill in what the primary roadway or facility is. And I'm going to say this is State Road 38 northbound. That's one of the required fields, and I'll click Submit for Acceptance. Now, when I do that, as the submitter, it's really out of my hands, and that's where someone else could log into this organization, and they would have their own login, and they'd log in as a reviewer, and that might be somebody that's associated with the DOT. Now, in this demonstration, I'm not going to log out and log back in as that person. I can do both roles in this organization, but understand that the reviewers could be a different set of people. So I'm going to look at, if I was a reviewer and I logged into the system, instead of just looking at my projects, I might look at all the projects that need to be reviewed, and I can see here's this resurfacing State Road 38 near Shawsheen Street. I'll click Review, and I can see all the things that they entered within this form. This was a process that existed with the paper form, but now it's available in this review process right here in a digital form, and they can decide what to do with it, accept it, reject it, add some comments to it so people understand why they rejected it. But I'll just go ahead and accept it to move it to the next stage. That that was a part of the project initiation phase. If I switch back over to view my projects, I can see it's now been, it's P&F accepted, so I can move on and, yeah, I'm sorry, it was P&F, the project need form is the phase that it was accepted in. Now we're going to move into the project initiation. I have a different set of, I have different information that needs to be submitted for the project initiation form. I'll just tell you there's a lot here. And some of it's already been filled in for me. But of course, I still need to do my due diligence to fill out all the necessary information for this form. I'll put in a scope of work. That's what's required to put in at this page just to move it along. I'll submit that for acceptance. And now the project initiation form has been submitted, and someone could come in and again, look at all the projects for review. They could click on that project and say it's ready for review. It's ready for PIF review. I'll review that, can go through all the information that they submitted and decide whether to accept or reject it. I'll accept it here. And now it's moved on in the process. So now I see that my project is PIF accepted. It's ready to move on. And to move on to the next stage of initiating this project. Now, in the case of Massachusetts, they have some other business systems that are involved in taking this project to the next level and doing the next level of scoping. And they use a system called Project Info for that. This integrates directly with Project Info. When it's gone through all these processes, it can move over to Project Info. They just select it here, push it into that Project Info system, and then that system can take it and work with that project from there. They also use roads and highways, so when the project has gone to this stage, they can export that project directly into roads and highways, and then they'll have a linear referencing. They'll have a representation of that project in their linear referencing system, as well as their project info system. And that's how the project can move from initial submission all the way into the final stages of project scoping and initiation. Now, as a user of this system, I can also see all the projects that are being submitted throughout the state. And there's a lot of benefit to this, just to have some visibility into all these things that are being submitted around the state. That level of transparency is something that they didn't really have in the past with the paper-based system. So by exposing this all in a digital form, we can expose that to everybody and have additional levels of collaboration within this environment. With that, I will stop presenting. That's basically the MapIt application that has kind of really reinvented how they submit projects within Massachusetts. I'll turn it over to Jose, who has some other applications to show you.
Okay, great. So this is the Caltrans project nomination application. And the idea with this application was Caltrans wanted to be able to see asset needs or treatments, as well as system planning needs, and even local agency, partner agency needs, all on a map together, and then be able to bundle them into a project. So, and by doing that, they can avoid, say, repaving a section of a highway, but then finding out a year later that a local agency had a need or project that they wanted to do in a nearby area, that if they'd done it all in one go together, it would have saved money or just ended up with a better result overall. And so this application lets them do that in a map-based visual way. And so first, I'll just briefly show you some of the data layers that we have here. Just like with MapIt, we have many layers that let a user get greater context about the area that they're working in. And here we have a number of different asset layers that are displayed. And if I zoom in a little bit, you can see them. And you'll see that they're actually color-coded according to their conditions. So things that are green here are conveyances or culverts that are in good condition. The ones that are in yellow are fair, and then ones that are red are poor. And then I have a number of other assets here sprinkled all around. If I scroll down here in the table of contents, I see many more layers that can give the user additional context and information about the area that they're working in. And Caltrans really liked this because before the users didn't really have ready access to all of these layers all in one place. So that saved them quite a bit of effort in trying to find those data layers. If I go over here and click Start, I'm presented with two workflows. And the scenario workflow is really an abbreviated version of the project workflow, where a user can sort of play in an area and see what they might want to do in an area without providing all of the information that is necessary in a project. So really the idea is for them to start with a scenario, maybe try a few different scenarios in an area, and after they picked a scenario that they want to proceed with in the planning process, they would then promote that scenario into a project and then fill out additional information for that project. So if I click scenario here, I'm presented with a few different ways of defining my project limits. And I'm going to choose to enter post miles. And so this little location dialog lets us specify the location of the project using the Caltrans post mile system. And this is actually using a Caltrans-based service behind the scenes. So in implementing this, we integrated actually with an existing Caltrans business system. And I gave this a buffer of 250 feet. And now when I click Next, I'm presented with all of the needs, assets and needs or treatments for bridges in this area. And so just to give you a little bit of an overview of this step here, if I were a first-time user, I would have seen this actually. So we have this little guide that takes the user around the different parts of this step just to orient them and tell them what they can do in each area. Once I more or less understand what I need to do though, I can click Finish, and the next time I log in, I won't see that. Here I'm presented with two programs, bridges and drainages. And I have an ability to select an anchor, and this is what would anchor this project. So this is typically the biggest or most expensive asset class in the area for the project that I want to do. I have the number of assets that I've selected to be in the project, the total number of assets that are here in the project limits, and then an indication of how much I've spent so far in this project and how much is left in my budget allocation for the year. Below that, I have the assets that are in the program that I've selected here. So here I'm seeing bridges. If I select drainages, I see many drainage systems here. And then down here, I'm seeing needs or treatments related to the assets up here. Right now, I'm showing all of the needs for these assets, but if I uncheck this and select on an individual drainage system, then I'm seeing the treatments that have been suggested for that specific drainage system. So I'm going to check this back on, and let's take a look at the drainages here. So this particular drainage system looks like it has 111 feet, linear feet in fair condition. So I think I would like to include this in our project. And when I selected that, immediately you saw this red button highlight. And this is telling me that I need to do something. And so if I click here, I'm presented with this dialog where I can enter how much this particular drainage system will contribute towards my district's objectives in a few different areas. So drainage systems have these two objectives associated with them. And for the drainage system restoration objective, I'm going to say that this drainage system will contribute 111 feet. If I select this one over here, I'm going to add this one as well. And I'm going to say that this will contribute 398 feet towards my drainage system restoration objective. And if I switch over to this objectives tab, I get a summary on a program basis of how this particular asset class is contributing towards my objectives. So this number of 509 is the sum of the two numbers that I entered here of 111 and 398 linear feet. So here I can see at a slightly higher level that total for this project I'm proposing to contribute 509 linear feet for this poor to good category. And then I see a capital cost and a support cost as well. And these are calculated automatically based on per linear feet costs that we have configured in the system. And at the same time, we've updated this remaining versus spent number up here based on the number of linear feet that we've entered and based on the budget that this district has for the year. I'm going to go ahead and select drainages as the anchor as well. So now we have a nice little anchor sign. And then I'm just going to go and select a bridge for good measure. These all happen to be in fairly, actually, I just noticed we do have one here that has fair health. And for bridges, you can see there's more objectives related to bridges. So I'm going to say this bridge will contribute, say, 200 square feet towards bridge health, and say 100 linear feet towards rail replacement and upgrade. And so now we have the remaining versus spent updated up here for bridges. If I switch to my objectives tab here for bridges, I can see on a program level a summary of how this how the bridges I've selected are contributing towards this project. If I select another one, let's say 200 linear feet here, let's say 500 square feet here, these numbers are updated by the way. And down here, I can also select which specific needs or treatments I would like to include in the project as well. So let's just include both of these needs. And for drainages, let's include this flush sediment treatment here. And down here at the very bottom, I have just a summary of the treatments or needs that I've selected to include in the project, just so I can see them easily in one place. So going all the way back to the top now, you noticed when I selected drainages as the anchor, we got a little anchor icon here, and the bridges is now considered a satellite. So it's it's not the main asset class for this project, but a satellite need or asset, so that's why we get this little moon icon. And if I click Objective Summary, I get a summary for the whole project and how it's contributing towards my objectives. So for the assets that I've included and for the objectives that I'm contributing towards, this gives me a high-level summary of how I'm contributing towards those objectives. And they're also categorized according to Caltrans' higher-level goals. So now I can click Next. I can give this scenario a name. And then I can run geoprocessing. Here we have a few layers configured. And then the last step in this workflow is to export. So this gives me the option of exporting all of the data that I just created, including all of the assets and needs that I've included in this project, exporting them out to CSV or to a file to a database. So just to kind of summarize what we've done here, we looked at assets on the map. We looked at the condition of those assets, both using symbology in the map, where things in fair condition are yellow and things in poor condition are red. We also looked at the attributes associated with those assets that told us how many linear feet were in fair condition or poor condition, and then using all that information decided what to include in this project, and then saw how the things that we were including in the project were contributing towards my district's assigned objectives. And then we could see how those in turn contributed towards Caltrans' higher level organizational goals. So at this point, I could then take this scenario and then turn it into a project if I'm happy with it. And then the project workflow lets me adjust everything that I just entered in case I need to. But then it also has a form similar to the one that Tom demonstrated with Mapit that lets me enter in textual and more descriptive information about the project that I'm proposing to do. So I won't demonstrate that. Instead, I'll go into this second application. So this is Corridor Sketch, or C-Sketch, which is an application that Washington State DOT has been using. And this one is a little bit different. The two main entities here are corridors as well as study areas. And in the filter here, I have a number of different filters where I can select corridors by region. These are the first few filters here. I can see my corridors, all corridors, but then you can also see study areas. So with corridors, all of the corridors already existed. So there wasn't really a need to be able to create new corridors, which is why you don't see a create new sort of button up here. So instead, this application is really about editing the information associated with these existing corridors. And this interface lets us do it in a more kind of ad hoc manner. So as opposed to the step-by-step workflows that you've been seeing so far, this lets me go to any part of the corridor information and update it when I need to. And I don't need to follow a particular order in doing that. And you'll notice some of these things have this order of display attribute. And that's because the information that's entered here is used to drive a report. And I'll show you that here momentarily. But the user would come in here, they would adjust information associated with the corridor, and then once they're happy with that, then they could generate the report here. So I've gone ahead and generated one, so you don't have to wait for that. So this is an example of one of these reports. So you can see it looks quite nice. It's very nicely colorful. And some of the information that you saw in that editing interface is reflected here. So the nodes, for example, these strategies are driven by the editing interface. The managers here are driven directly by what the user enters, as well as the text down here. So this lets users easily edit information associated with the corridor and then get a very nice looking information product out at the end of it. The next capability I'll show here is the study areas capability. And this one lets a user run the same geoprocessing capability that you've seen in our two previous demos with MassDOT and Caltrans project nomination, but then browse the results in a more interactive fashion. So whereas the capability in the other two applications is mostly used to drive the population of forms, in this case, the ability is used to explore an area and understand it and analyze it. I'm going to just give this a name and description. And I'm going to draw an area of interest here. And then this is the geoprocessing window here. And so there's a number of different layers configured. This configuration, or these layers, are driven by the same configuration on the back end that the capability that we saw in the Mapit application and in the Caltrans application are driven by. But here I can also edit this buffer value. And if I click run, I get some intersections here. And just to kind of emphasize, this capability is configurable, so it's not hard-coded to query against these particular layers. So if additional layers need to be queried against, that is just a configuration change, not a coding change. And if I browse in this dialog now, I can see the different layers that have intersections. And now I can actually go to the different data points that have had intersections with this area of interest that I've drawn. And I can understand the area that I'm working in a bit better. And then this interactive geoprocessing capability also has an ability to create a report to export the data to CSV. And that's it. Terry?
Okay, thanks, Jose. And now we're going to open it up for questions. And I think we already have a number, I guess. The first question really had to do with sort of the left-hand pane, and I guess there was a question of what technology was that developed in, and I guess that really applies not only to the Mapit, but really each of these others. How did you develop the left-hand pane and really the processes running there on the left hand?
Jose, do you want to take that, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I can take that. So just to clarify, is the question about this project grid here, or about the workflow here?
Yeah, the question was, what technology was it developed in? That, I don't think the questioner had really sort of seen these types of processes programmed on the left there.
Okay, yeah. So all three of these applications are Web App Builder based. So Web App Builder is an application framework that Esri has that that brings a lot to the table just out of the box. So things like the layerless widget and the printing capability that Tom showed come built in, but it also lets us extend it and add custom capabilities, which is what we've done with what you see here with these steps and the forms and other things that you see in this sort of light area. And then the project grid here is also a custom extension to Web App Builder that we created. And those extensions are written in HTML and JavaScript.
Okay, great, thanks. And another question really having to do with the Caltrans app. The question was, which district was that app developed for?
So this data, the data that, or the area that I was in was District 6. So the detailed data that you saw came from District 6, which is in the area sort of surrounding Fresno.
Okay, and let's see, for the corridor summary, what technology generates the report or the reports?
Yeah, so the report is generated using Microsoft reporting technology. So it's a server-side technology that Microsoft has that lets you define very detailed layouts for reports and then drive the generation of the reports from a database. So we take the data that the users entered, which is in our database, and then run it through Microsoft reporting, and then that's how we get those nice reports.
Okay. And let's see, this would probably be more of a question for Gary. If a DOT saw one of these applications and they wanted to get started, how would they go about that? How configurable, and how would they get access, and how would they implement one of these different applications?
So these projects have all been conducted through our professional services group. They've written these components that Jose was just describing. They are configurable, so the application itself is a very nice repeatable base to start with. But basically, we would work with you, set up a requirements gathering session, and figure out exactly what it was that you needed to have done, and put together a project plan for implementing.
And if you go back to your original slides, if you think back to that, I mean, you outlined that whole sort of process. Not only the process at MassDOT, but the way that we abstracted it and so forth. We don't really have a complete application for every one of those, but the real intent is to how do you put those pieces together in an organized and coherent way, really to orchestrate the entire process. Is that really kind of the goal of what you're really trying to achieve here?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And we have used some other components of our technology to help coordinate things like Workflow Manager. As you saw in that diagram, it's a pretty complex process when you think of it end to end. There's a little bit of workflow just in that left pane as people are entering data, but once you get to one portion of the end of a process, we can capture the overall workflow and help coordinate the movement of that through those different boxes and application areas that I spoke of at the beginning.
Right. So in essence, some of these project submission really goes through, it evaluates against the whole range of environmental considerations, really almost it does an environmental pre-screening to make sure that there are no immediate environmental conflicts. It can actually have a prioritization and a scoring component to really sort of help really give a standardized process for which how you make decisions about deciding on projects and selecting between competing projects. That's basically the concept. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we have not really found an area of the entire process, no matter how many people it involves or how complicated the formulas or criteria are, working through some of the technology like we've shown today that we've built, and some of our partners that specialize in certain aspects of that funding or optimization. We have been able to address all of the needs across that whole process and link it all together.
All right. And these demos, for those of you on the line that will be at GIST next week, I assume these demos will be there as well?
At least some of them will.
Yep. Yep, that's right.
Okay, good. So looking ahead, if for any of you that will be at GIST next week, if you want to really dig in more on these, we will have these demos there as well. And let's see, anything else, Gary, that you want to add?
I don't think so. It's been an exciting set of applications to build out and really help people address a complex process that cross-cuts almost the entire organization and outside to other organizations. So,
and if you go back,
the only other thing I was going to say is maybe we'll get an infrastructure bill and there'll be a whole lot more money that gets passed
yeah.
on to people to do more of this project work.
Right. Yeah, so we'd like to thank all of you for being on the webinar today. If you do have any additional questions, I'll give you our email addresses, and there are actually a few other resources. We have access to a white paper that really goes into greater detail describing the project planning process. We have a few papers from Federal Highway really focused on performance-based planning and some of the new requirements. And again, here are each of our email addresses to reach out if you have additional questions. And so again, we'd like to thank you for being on the webinar today, and we look forward to welcoming you to a future webinar. So thank you.